Avoidant individuals carry a complex emotional blueprint. Their fear of intimacy often masks a deeper yearning for connection. But not all connections are created equal in the avoidant's mind. There's a vast difference between how they treat someone they see as a mere option versus someone they see as irreplaceable, the one. These contrasts are often subtle to the average eye, but when you truly understand the psychology behind avoidant attachment, you'll begin to see the hidden signs, the shifts in behavior, and the emotional chaos that occurs when an avoidant starts to fall for someone in a way they never intended. This video dives deep into the psychological split avoidance experience when dealing with an option vs. encountering someone who stirs something real in them. What changes? Everything. Let's break it down. When an avoidant perceives a woman as just an option, emotional detachment becomes their natural operating mode. They may appear charming, even flirtatious, but there's always a wall between what they show and what they truly feel. Their interactions are often transactional, measured, controlled, and emotionally distant. They keep conversations surface level, avoid vulnerability, and redirect emotional depth. This detachment isn't necessarily malicious, it's a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from emotional enmeshment, which they often associate with danger, loss of control, or even identity annihilation. So, when a woman is just an option, they remain in emotional cruise control. They enjoy the attention, the companionship, maybe even the intimacy, but they're always half in and half out. They may keep her around, but won't include her in their future. She doesn't touch the deeper layers of their heart, so they stay safe behind their emotional armor. But when an avoidant meets someone who triggers deeper emotions, someone who feels like the one, the script flips, and often in very confusing ways. Suddenly, the emotional detachment they've relied on starts to crack. Feelings emerge that they didn't plan for and don't know how to handle. This new emotional energy disrupts their internal world. They may try to deny it, act like nothing's changed, or even retreat entirely, but deep down, they know something is different. This woman has stirred something real, and real is terrifying for them. While they once were cool, controlled, and indifferent, now they find themselves anxious, conflicted, and emotionally activated. They may not openly express their emotions, but the difference is evident in how much they begin to internalize the connection. They think about her more than they'd like to admit. They notice her absence more. Their mood shifts based on interactions with her. The connection forces them to feel again, and while that might sound romantic, it's deeply unsettling for someone who's built their identity around emotional independence. Emotional investment for them isn't liberating, it's destabilizing. But even in their fear, they can't fully detach like they normally would. They might still pull away, but this time it's not apathy driving the distance, it's fear. They retreat not because they don't care, but because they care too much. So while an avoidance emotional detachment is predictable when a woman is just an option, everything changes when real emotional investment kicks in. Their controlled, composed demeanor begins to unravel. They may seem more agitated, more inconsistent, even more distant. But this isn't rejection. It's evidence that their emotional defenses are being tested by someone who reached past the surface. To the outside world, they might still look avoidant. But internally, they're in a silent war between fear and desire, between staying safe and risking everything. When a woman is just an option to an avoidant, their behavior often becomes a confusing dance of hot and cold patterns. They can be incredibly charming one moment, sending flirtatious messages or showing affection, and then suddenly turn cold and indifferent the next. This inconsistency isn't about playing games to impress her. It's about emotional control. Avoidants don't feel the need to maintain a steady connection with someone they've subconsciously categorized as non-threatening or replaceable. Since they don't perceive any real risk of emotional enmeshment, they allow themselves to oscillate between presence and absence, connection and detachment without much guilt or inner conflict. They'll ignore messages for hours or days, respond without enthusiasm, and then suddenly become available again when it suits them. It creates emotional instability for the other person, but for the avoidant, it's a way of maintaining space and protecting their sense of autonomy. This hot and cold pattern is also a test, though not a conscious one. They're observing how much someone will tolerate, how far they can push without consequences, and how safe they are from emotional obligations. When the woman is just an option, she doesn't threaten their emotional walls. They can disappear without fear of loss. They may even deliberately create distance just to prove to themselves that they're still in control of the dynamic. The relationship exists on their terms, and emotional consistency is never a priority. But when the avoidant begins to feel something deeper, when a woman starts to feel like the one, something dramatic happens. That same person who was once unpredictable starts to seek some form of consistency. It might not be smooth or healthy, but it becomes clear that they're trying. They might still retreat at times, but now there's a subtle difference in their behavior, hesitation, remorse, and even anxiety about their own patterns. Their cold phases become shorter and their hot phases become more intense. They try to stay connected in ways that weren't necessary before. Even if awkwardly or clumsily, they show up more. They might send a message just to check in, initiate plans, or follow through on things they would have otherwise ignored. That's because now their emotional investment is rising. And with it, their fear of losing her. They don't want to admit how much they care, but they also can't stand the idea of her walking away. So even though their avoidant instincts still push them toward distance, their feelings pull them back in. This internal tug of war shows up as subtle shifts in consistency. Their attempts to stay present may lack the smoothness of a secure partner, but the effort becomes more visible. They try to regulate the chaos within themselves in order to remain near her, even if they don't yet know how to maintain a steady emotional presence. This is when you'll notice the cracks in their avoidant patterns, not because they're ready to change, but because her presence is no longer optional. It matters. Avoidants thrive on control. It's their psychological safety net, controlling their emotions, controlling how much they give, and especially controlling how much they let someone in. When a woman is just an option, they hold all the power. They decide when to engage, how deep the connection goes, and how much of themselves they reveal. They are in the driver's seat, often setting the pace of the relationship while remaining emotionally distant. This dominance allows them to keep their emotional world untouched and intact. There's no real fear involved because the stakes are low. They don't feel compelled to make space for her in their life in any meaningful way. So the power balance leans heavily in their favor. If things get uncomfortable or even slightly inconvenient, they simply pull away without remorse. There's no vulnerability involved, no real risk of emotional pain, and certainly no disruption of their inner world. It's all about control, and when a woman is just an option, they maintain that control without effort. However, the entire landscape shifts when they perceive her as someone who could actually matter. Someone who challenges their emotional barriers not by force, but simply by being real. This is the moment where their need for control begins to clash with vulnerability. Suddenly, the power they once comfortably held feels like a burden. They can't stop thinking about her. They become sensitive to her mood, her reactions, her presence, and especially her absence. It's not just about control anymore, it's about fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of opening up and getting hurt. Vulnerability starts to creep in, and for avoidance, that's the most dangerous feeling of all. This vulnerability does not make them soft or openly expressive. Instead, it often makes them reactive, distant, or contradictory. They may pull back harder than before, not because they're disinterested, but because the emotional intensity is too much. When control slips through their fingers, they don't know how to regulate what they're feeling. Instead of leaning into the connection, they instinctively try to protect themselves by retreating. Ironically, This makes them feel even more out of control. The emotional chaos they've always avoided is now inside of them, and the very person who triggered it is the one they're trying to push away. The shift from control to vulnerability isn't clean or linear. It's messy, full of conflicting behaviors and inner turmoil. They want closeness, but they fear being seen. They crave intimacy, but they're terrified of depending on someone. When a woman touches that emotional nerve and becomes more than an option, the avoidant finds themselves in a psychological crisis. Keep controlling the situation and risk losing her, or surrender some of that control and face emotional exposure. This internal war becomes the clearest signal that she is not just another passing connection. She's someone who shook the very foundation of how they've always protected themselves. When an avoidant views a woman as just an option, intimacy is carefully rationed and tightly managed. Their version of closeness is often limited to surface-level interactions, physical attraction, casual conversation, light banter, and fleeting emotional moments that never go too deep. They may engage in romantic or sexual encounters, but it's all strategically kept on the surface. There's an invisible boundary that ensures the other person never really reaches the inner core of who they are. They avoid emotional vulnerability by steering conversations away from personal topics, glossing over past experiences, or even joking to deflect serious moments. This superficial engagement allows them to feel connected without ever risking emotional exposure. It's a calculated way of being present without being truly known, and it protects them from the discomfort of genuine emotional intimacy. However, when they begin to sense that a woman could be the one, the wall they've built around themselves starts to weaken, sometimes without them even realizing it. What starts as guarded interaction slowly transforms into unexpected vulnerability. They may begin to share pieces of their story, past heartbreaks, family dynamics, fears, or internal struggles. These revelations often come out accidentally in moments when their guard is lowered, and they may immediately try to downplay them afterward. But what's important is that it happens at all. For an avoidant, opening up isn't natural. It's involuntary when true emotional connection starts to take root. With the one, they begin to experience subconscious bonding. It's not just about time spent or conversations shared. It's about a deeper resonance, something about her that makes them feel strangely safe yet exposed. This subconscious bonding shows in subtle ways. They begin to remember small details she shares, replay conversations in their head, and feel her emotional state almost as if it were their own. It's not something they talk about, but it's something they feel, and it disrupts the detachment they rely on. They may even find themselves becoming emotionally affected by things that normally wouldn't bother them. A short message, a delayed reply, a shift in tone, all begin to hold weight. These things wouldn't even register with someone they saw as just an option. But now, everything feels more intense. They become more attuned, more reactive, and more internally conflicted. Avoidants don't seek this kind of intimacy consciously. In fact, it often terrifies them. But when it happens, it reveals that their heart has latched onto someone deeper than they intended. They might not have the emotional tools to manage it maturely, but their behavior starts to shift in ways that betray their feelings. They may still run retreat or act confused, but the emotional depth they've tapped into with this woman doesn't fade easily. It lingers, it stirs them, and it changes the way they see her. She's no longer just someone to enjoy in the moment. She's become someone who touches the parts of them they usually hide. And for an avoidant, that's the most intimate experience of all. Even if they never say it out loud, when a woman is just an option to an avoidant, communication is often treated with indifference. Texts go unanswered for hours, sometimes days. Calls are ignored, conversations are short, and replies are usually dry or non-committal. There's no urgency, no emotional weight behind their interactions. They don't overthink what to say or how their silence might be interpreted because emotionally they aren't invested. If she pulls away, they may not even notice or care much. This detachment allows them to operate from a place of emotional safety, where they're not at risk of being vulnerable or feeling the sting of emotional consequences. Delayed replies aren't a tactic, they're simply a reflection of the lack of importance they assign to the connection. They're not worried about impressing her or maintaining a steady emotional thread because deep down they don't fear losing someone who never felt essential to begin with. But everything shifts when the woman becomes more than just an option, when she starts to feel like the one. Suddenly, the avoidant who once felt in control of communication starts to experience an unexpected psychological shift. Now, every interaction carries weight. Every word they send is carefully considered. Every pause or silence from her creates internal panic, and delayed responses from her trigger waves of anxiety they can't explain. This is the internal world of the avoidant in emotional overdrive, overthinking everything while pretending not to care. They might stare at her message for minutes, unsure of what to say. They write and rewrite replies. They may even hold back from texting first, afraid they'll appear too needy or exposed, despite desperately wanting to connect. Silence, which used to be their weapon, now becomes their tormentor. When she doesn't respond, their thoughts spiral. Did I say something wrong? Is she losing interest? Did I open up too much? These obsessive thoughts don't reflect weakness. They're signs of emotional attachment breaking through their avoidant defenses. What's most confusing about this stage is the contrast between how they behave and how they feel. On the surface, they might still delay a reply or act aloof, but behind the scenes their mind is racing. They become hyper-aware of the energy in every exchange, reading into emojis, punctuation, or slight shifts in tone. These are things they never paid attention to before, and yet now they obsess over them. This is the emotional cost of attachment for the avoidant. Silence becomes loud, and uncertainty becomes unbearable. They may not know how to express this turmoil directly, so instead, their communication may come off as inconsistent or anxious. They might double text and then disappear. They may initiate a deep conversation one moment and avoid it entirely the next. But underneath it all is a vulnerable, emotionally activated person who is terrified of losing something that feels real. The obsessive overthinking, though invisible to the outside world, is a clear sign that she's no longer just an option. She has triggered a depth of feeling they didn't think they were capable of, and that realization changes everything. When a woman is just an option to an avoidant, the relationship revolves around their ego. They make decisions based on what serves their comfort, independence, and emotional safety. The dynamic is more about control than connection, and their actions are designed to maintain dominance over the emotional space. They might come across as charming, flirtatious, or even emotionally available in small doses, but it's all filtered through the lens of self-preservation. If things feel too emotionally demanding, they withdraw. If the woman expresses a need for more depth or commitment, they interpret it as pressure and retreat even further. Their ego drives the interaction. It wants admiration without intimacy, attention without vulnerability, closeness without responsibility. When she's just an option, their emotional posture is one of superiority. They want to be desired, not to desire. They want her orbiting them, not the other way around. Everything is on their terms, and the moment that changes, they become cold or distant. It's a calculated way of staying safe, where the ego remains untouchable and unchallenged. But when she's the one, something entirely different begins to happen. The ego, once so confidently in charge, starts to lose its grip. This isn't a graceful surrender. It's a soul-level turmoil. The avoidant doesn't want to feel what they're feeling, but they can't turn it off. The emotional connection shakes them from the inside out. Their usual tactics, distancing, ignoring, controlling, don't work the same way. In fact, the more they try to suppress their emotions, the more intense those emotions become. They start to question themselves, why do I care so much? Why can't I stop thinking about her? Why does this feel so different? That's because it is different. Their heart has been activated in a way that challenges everything their ego has built to keep them emotionally safe. This internal conflict often leads to self-sabotaging behaviors. They might lash out